Hails and welcome to Rauta's 11th episode in Finnish black metal history series, that is black metal from the 90s, so-called original black metal. Now, the first few episodes obviously featured the very early bands, which basically touched even 80s, Beherit, Archcode, and so forth. But as we all know, most Finnish black metal didn't really exist before the 90s, and hence that's what we're talking about here. Now, in this episode 11, the theme seems to be merely by coincidence. Well, actually not. I sometimes lump this up together based by theme. The theme is the ones that once were and are not here anymore, i.e. split up bands. One of them is actually a very recent band that decided to split up, and two of those other bands, well, they decided to go a long time ago. Now, because I just happen to have extra beer here, I'm gonna enjoy this episode with you with some Allasebat Nimbus Drifter, NEIPA, New England India Pale Ale, so kind of a hazy one. Now, what I was about to say is I got this beer for free. No, jokes aside, that's not really a joke. I also got this great Allasebat glass for free, so I'm just putting some product placement here while enjoying some Friday night beer. So the bands in question today are in alphabetical order: Arthemesia Funeris Nocturnum and Urn. And all of them started obviously in the 90s, but didn't really do albums until 2000s. Old enough for this case, but not as old as some of the previous ones. None of these are exactly big, never were, but not exactly fully small, unknown underground acts. I mean, technically speaking, these are kind of underground acts, but not as small as some of the less known bands. But let's go in the order, basically, who was the first to get anything out of the whole system, that is. Can't really put them in, year by year order, because two of them were started in 1994 and one of them a little bit later. So going with these in rather chronological order, starting with Urn, originally from Kuopio region, pretty much the same city as Baratrum back in the days. Now, Urn has always more or less, after the beginning anyway, been revolving around one key member of the band. I think which is quite safe if we start with the lineup first, the last known lineup anyway, because the band split up now in 2025. When it actually happened, I guess some would say spring or summer, but I already heard rumors about splitting up in 2024. However, back then the band kind of decided to do comeback and make even a new album, but eventually the band was kind of bound to split up. And yeah, I never got to do interview with them, even though there were some talks before the band split up that maybe that could happen. But sometimes things change or go south before you can even, react to it. Anyway, Sulfur, known for the vocals, guitars, and bass, started the band around 1994, and he was the very last member to, be in the band. Past members list is quite vast too. I mean, you had some previous Baratrum members. In addition to Sulfur, who also played in Baratrum at some point, you had these guys, Infernus, Pimea, also from 1990s, who played also in Baratrum. So at some point, while this is not exactly true, but it was almost like Urn was some kind of a Baratrum side project. But obviously that's not really the case. It just happens that Kuopio is not that big of a city. So, a lot of people who were into black metal scene played in Baratrum too. And of course, Flame was a side of Urn too. So there were some split members in that sense. Now, through the years, you've seen a lot of people come and go. So some people lasted for long, some early members, not too long, only a few years. Then people started changing. So you had some people a few years more. And if you would see this list, in detail, you will see like people like Helvin Inferion, who was part of the band for quite a few years. He had a lot of other bands. Same goes for Revenant, who also played in, among others, War Moon Lord and all that stuff. So there are quite a few veteran members in the band, or was. What is curious, however, that throughout the years, even though Sulfur moved to different city and officially Urn was mentioned in Tampere, very much a hub in Finnish black metal because of bands like Horna, Sargeist, what have you. The rest of the band, the three other guys, along with Sulfur, who were in the band already also quite a few years, they were all Turku based, my home city, and you will see that they do have their own connection to one another, especially through thrash metal band Devastator, who had their members playing in all. And what is curious is that all these three other guys were more known for their death metal thing rather than black metal or thrasher stuff. Even featured one own ex-band member guy, Accelerator, from Nightside's early years. Anyway, be it as may, this kind of shows how small Finnish scene in general tends to be. But anyway, let's go back to Urn's history. So, 1994, the band started, but it was as late as 1997 before they got to do their first demo called Promo 1997. 2 years later, it was time for EP, Nightmare. And another 2 years later, 2001, which seems to be a magical year for a lot of bands out there in the Finnish black metal scene. I'm not making this up. Nightside was one of those 2001 starting bands. You will see Arthemesia doing the same, and same was for Urn as well, and a lot of other bands. So 666 megatons, which was almost like a raw metal cover if you really think about it. This started what was kind of a signature style of Urn for quite some time, and that is black thrash metal. This is very much the reason why this is the genre for Urn here, black thrash, because that's technically speaking what it is. Then again, you could go hair splitting and say, but that's really what the first wave black metal was all about. Think about Bathory, think about, Celtic Frost, and so on. Especially the Bathory style of, being kind of a black thrash or just first wave of black metal was really what was going on with 666 megatons. Also, 5 years later, when it was time for another full album, Dawn of the Devastation, the style pretty much continued. However, this is a very curious. They had this evil, snowman on the cover. I was like very much like, what the fuck? Kind of nowadays it more cracks me up, but back in the days it was more like, are you serious? Are you gonna go full Gehenna rather than, whatever? But, obviously these kind of covers don't ruin the reputation, but it was maybe kind of a wink of an eye rather than, hey, we're gonna be super evil. Even though they had song like, Bestial Evil, Total Hate, Ruthless Strike, Possessed by Satan, everything here reeks of pure classic black metal. But their style was indeed quite thrashy early on, and I think that's why they truly deserved this black thrash thing going on. However, things were bound to change, and 2 years later, when Soul Destroyers came to be, things were already, in this transition phase in a way. While you would hear certain thrashy elements throughout whole Urn discography, you kind of start hearing these small changes here and there. In which case, what it really means here is thrash metal putting more in the background and heavy metal starting to replace it. You would always have this certain black metal thing going on, because after all, the vocals would be raspy, and you would certainly have this kind of a black metallic production in the albums, especially the early two ones, which are kind of have this homemade feeling, the kind of a classic 1990s black metal. Definitely not high five, but not exactly super raw, but the kind of dirty, not too polished kind of a thing. But like I said, that was about to change. With The Burning, which came quite a few years later than the third album, things were again changing even further. Now, if you listen to this album and start comparing it to the especially two first ones, you will see that there is this change going on. If you would check out the lineups at this point, you would see this is pretty different from the early members. So definitely something was stirring up, and the band was somehow changing, you could say maturing, but also in a way softening. And I don't mean softening here as a bad thing. I'm just saying that this thrashiness started to be replaced more and more with heavy metal. And I would say even more emphasized it is with Iron Wheel of Power, which is very, very much, starting from the cover even, I don't know, somehow more heavy metal like, but with this black metal touch. Now, throughout the whole Urn discography, those black metal vocals are very, very much present. So it's not like, they started, get rid of black metal. More like thrashiness went all more on the background, and heavy metal started like sipping in. It's almost like, changing certain members. Hey, you gotta go, I'm gonna step in. Like in sports, bench breaks, whatever they are called. And then finally, there is one song, 2025, 6 years later than the previous album, Demon Steel. Some people say, and unfortunately I have to agree, the vocals are really the weakest link in this game. Now, these last two albums actually, in terms of songwriting, are probably the best Urn ever. While there isn't this first wave or first era Urn thrashiness present anymore, I think the heavy metal thing is actually in a way better. I think the band got better over the years. The production got so much more better, and I mean that's probably the reason why they also got signed to Osmos Productions late in the game. They were also like Season of Mist underground activists, so I mean they clearly kind of climbed up the ladder album by album. And this gradual change throughout these albums, I mean, it wasn't happening overnight. Then again, there is also 24 years of difference between the debut album and the last one. But I would say, basically, Urn has two major phases. The early one, which is definitely black thrash, and the last one, which is more black heavy metal. And if they only had better vocalists, I think Urn could have really been big. Now, obviously, it's not really easy to go with this style, because for black metal people, your music can be seen too tame. It's kind of too soft, too heavy metal-like. And for heavy metal fanatics, hey, you don't have a heavy metal vocalist. You are doing the black metal style. So in a way, it fell into a kind of a tough spot, They were not really catering to any of those basic needs, death metal, black metal, thrash metal, but always kind of a hybrid. Now, for that reason, I think Urn played, in a way, important part of whole black metal history. Never too overrated, never maybe got the recognition they were probably supposed to have. But I mean, there's always a reason why certain bands don't just fly that much. Now, these Metal Archives reviews are way too few to really make any kind of a conclusion about how and which album are rated best. If you want to see how they are really rated, maybe we could go for Rate Your Music and see how Urn is really, viewed in general. Now here you see my takes on these albums. I would definitely change maybe some of these, but I think in a way these first albums, they have the thrashiness, which is quite good, so I'm rounding up them to 4 stars. And here with The Burning and Iron Wheel of Power and Demon Steel, well, while I have rated them a little bit less, in a way they are better. But this is just partially how ratings would change over the years. Anyway, my ratings are not really the point here, but to see how other people have rated, and only why these are still a few, like more than 100 or all that stuff, not even to 200 people, giving these ratings, you get some kind of idea. 666 megatons is rated as the best, and then Dawn of the Devastation, and then it kind of goes down in slow decline. That's kind of unfortunate from, band perspective, obviously. But this is also how it seems the black metal people are like maybe less forgiving for these style changes, and I don't think Urn had the time to really win over some new audience. But it's not like they're small bands in terms of social media numbers, not really big either. Anyway, Urn made an interesting career over the years, and what it's worth, the music still lives on, even if this particular band is not doing stuff. And it seems Sulfur has moved on to his new solo project after this one, and it's called Graves. What's funny though, that a lot of Urn-related stuff got deleted from their Facebook page just recently. Because in past few weeks when I was checking out some information for these videos and all, I remember seeing some of the stuff posted this year, and now, not too long time ago, maybe 2 weeks ago, prior to making this video, I was checking out some Urn, Facebook for, getting these links together here, which are linked in the description box. I noticed a lot of stuff were really deleted, and now the latest posts were just about Graves. So it's kind of a shame a lot of those posts, a lot of those announcements, statements, whatever, are gone. And it seems that Urn is really buried deep. Shame, but hey, it is what it is. Time to move on to Arthemesia, the second band in this particular episode. Now, as Urn, they started already as early as 1994, which in Finnish standards is very, very early. I mean, a lot of bands didn't even exist before 1995, 1996, so on. But obviously you had the early birds, including Baratrum, Horna, whatever, before 1994. But not too much. So, in that sense, Arthemesia was quite early on in the game. However, nothing really happened until the demo 98. And after that came another demo, which is always the smart thing to do. Start with the demos and then move on to album once you have kind of figured out what you want to do, what is your style, and so forth. And 2001, which is the year I mentioned already, an important year for Finnish black metal, Deus Iratus came and did its job. Now, this is curious if you look at the past members. I'm starting with the past members, is that if you go for the 1990s members, you will see people like Guy, who played in Ensiferum and Wintersun. That's pretty curious if you really think about it. It was almost like a whole different thing. Also, Jari Mäenpää from Wintersun and ex-Ensiferum, he was also part of the band in the late 90s to early 2000s. So this was a very, very different band. You can see that there are like 3 ex-Ensiferum guys who were in the band. Ensiferum is not exactly known for being a black metal band, so you can see some kind of a pattern here. Later on, this band changed. Once again, Baratrum is, by the way, part of here. And you will see also keyboard player who used to be ex-Gynergy, ex-Children of Bodom Live, Lord even, and all that stuff. And you had legendary Kai Hart to play drums for a bit. So this band had very, very magical lineup along the years, or lots of people from legendary lineups, which was curious. Last known lineup was kind of interesting too. I mean, you had Moonzero guy for drums. You had Thasmork, who was mostly known for Algazant. You had this other guy also from Moonzero, etc. And of course you had this vocalist who were there all the way long in this band and later joined Evil, Might and Grieve for at least for a little bit. So the lineup really had some magical members, but maybe it was too much in turmoil to really do its job. I don't know. However, 2001, when the album came, it got some very positive things. This is also true in On radio music, I mean, if you go for radio music to check out Arthemesia, you will see that this first album is clearly rated better than the second album. I have to disagree. I think the second album is clearly better than the first album. The first album is not bad by no means. The thing here is it's just kind of a typical keyboard driven even black metal. I mean, it's very, very much like take your mid or late 90s Norwegian black metal and do it in a Finnish version. You would say there's a little bit maybe Gehenna, maybe a little bit some, I don't know, Emperor or whatever in the mix. Not exactly symphonic, but definitely keyboard driven stuff. And then you have melodic riffs and all that stuff. It's a little bit of a mess in my opinion. But like I said, some people really, really seem to like it. There's a reason why it has 96% on Metal Archive's site. For me, it's kind of like an album that you probably should have heard back in the days to really appreciate it and respect and all that stuff. Now it seems more like it was a little bit late to the party versus the Norwegian scene. It doesn't have its own sound so much. It's just one of those keyboard albums back in the days. Like I said, not bad, but unfortunately didn't resonate too much with me. Now, a funny thing is that me and the vocalist, we were originally like a little bit like not in good terms, and we even played at the same show. Later on became friends, and later on our paths parted away again. Why I'm mentioning is this, it's funny because the one show we played, I remember it's one of those black metal shows in my home city, which was so magical in a way because we were a bunch of just new bands, playing there. And nobody would know how life would be some 10, 20, 30 years almost later. But yeah, golden ages in a way, and it's kind of a shame that Arthemesia's career ended too quickly. I mean, it took 8 years for them, after multiple of demos, to do this full album called AOA. You could say Alpha, Omega, Alpha. Not very easy to sell album with such a title, AOA, versus you would have anything else. Anyhow, this is a curious album because, in a way, it's very much more complex than the first album, but it's also more consistent in quality. It's just written by different people than the first album, and that's the reason to its consistency, but that's also the reason why it sounds so different. Now, in today's view, this album sounds more like a post-black metal thing. There are lots of ideas which don't really fit the black metal style or bill. Meaning there are lots of clean vocals, the songs tend to be too lengthy, it's kind of a progressive atmospheric black metal kind of a thing, and the production is really good. There are lots of great ideas along the lines, that there are also parts where it just feels like it's just, not going anywhere. For example, my good friend mentioned this last song is one of the best on the album, and I'm like, it's a drag. It doesn't go anywhere, it still lasts for like 10 minutes. So people see and hear different kind of things when it comes to this whole thing. But I think we agreed with my good friend that Valkoinen Susi, White Wolf, is their hit song. It's a hit song with 8 minutes, and it definitely has this momentum. Now, my only problem with this AOA is that it's kind of a too much getting into this post-black metal thing. Some might say it's just atmospheric black metal with a very progressive touch, and I really can't disagree with that. But for me, because of a lot of clean vocals, lots of riffs which don't really even sound like a black metal thing. I mean, without raspy vocals, you could just say it's something like mellow death or atmospheric metal, whatever. So it's a little bit, kind of a crossing the border into a new region, and as such, gonna be definitely dividing people into two. Out of curiosity, I actually read one of the reviews here on Metal Archive's site for this album because I was wondering why the first album is so praised and this is not. Now, one of the reviews actually mentioned that he was so disappointed on this after the first album he really liked. And I was like, it's so funny because I think the other way around. I think the band actually evolved into something way better. But, opinions and all that stuff. But like I said, it's pretty much the same here on Radio Music. This is rated 3.38. This only 317. Why I only rated this 3.5 is it because this has some boring parts. I'm very close to giving it a 4 out of 5, but not exactly. If only the songs were more compact, it would be a 4-star album. It's pretty good and definitely worth listening to, and I would say if you only listen to one album by this band out of the two, AOA is definitely the one I would recommend, even though it sounds less typical black metal than Deus Iratus. An interesting band for sure. Could have really been bigger if they maintained the style and went for, I don't know, full Agalloch with the style, but, maybe there were just too many lineup changes, too many key members changing. This is the story. Only 2 albums within a lot of years, so too bad. But hey, life is what it is and we move on. Funeris Nocturnum from Jyväskylä, same city as bands like Varloke and in a way Brythes and all. This was a curious band because it didn't last for too many years. I mean, started 1998 and lasted only until 2004, and then the flame was gone. Now, when especially you consider that the debut album came 2000, so before these other bands, even though they started a few years later, you could say they burned hot and bright, even if it lasted only for a few years. I mean, these albums really came back to back, 2000, 2001, 2002, and that's when they were gone. It was pretty interesting because all of these guys were relatively young. I especially remember the vocalist, which I will mention briefly. You will understand what I'm getting here. He was a teenager when he joined the band. I mean, he was a founding member, if I'm not mistaken. So this was one of those bands that, had teenagers in the band, but they were furious, they were aggressive, and they were pushing hard. Not everybody liked them, of course, but then again, whatever band is going to be like that. But what they started with pure satanic blasphemy was very aggressive, not exactly original album, but it was fast, it was furious, it was fast tempo, so aggressive, and at the same time very traditional second wave black metal. Lasting for 42 minutes through 9 tracks. I mean, nothing out of ordinary here, but they made it pretty good, and already the flames were lit up like, hey, we're gonna see whatever is happening with the second one from the aspect of darkly illuminated. Now, this came only, like I said, a year later. Now, a little bit less music, 8 tracks, 34 minutes. The style was pretty much the same, but this time your typical second album thing happened. It felt like this album is more like leftovers than the original ideas. So this was a little bit paling in comparison to the first album, even if the style was roughly the same. So they were doing pretty good job once again, but I would say the first album is the best. Now, third one, Code 666, Religion Syndrome Deceased. The band started shedding their skin and kind of recreating themselves in the process. Suddenly, this 34-minute of an album with 9 tracks and, mind you, annoying silence in the end, which makes this album last something like 50 whatever minutes, but if you remove the silence parts, it's less than 35 minutes. Now, they started doing some kind of an industrial take with this one. Now, if this rings you a bell with Rebel Extravaganza by Satyricon, you're on the right track. No, they didn't go for Mysticum or Thorns level, or Diabolicum for that matter, kind of industrial black metal, but they added the kind of an industrial layer on the top of things, which means Rebel Extravaganza really. And now they had more kind of an industrial sound too, super polished, even too polished. They had keyboard parts which reminded me later era and Oceans. So they were in a transition phase, starting very basic, aggressive black metal, kind of Finnish version of Marduk in a way, but becoming something else. And obviously the next logical step would be honing this stuff to a next level. Maybe becoming something like a combination, a hybrid of, I don't know, Satyricon and Oceans, what have you. But, like I said, the story was over by 2004. It's funny, by the way, I found my old interview with these guys from 2003, where I had, done this written interview with the vocalist. Back then, we're still friends, mind you. And it was curious because we were talking about future plans and all that stuff. Now, in hindsight, those future plans never came reality. But what happened was a new band. Funeris Nocturnum was gone, but something very different, something more popular was stirring up. This is a good place for me to kind of, before we end, mention this. Okay, it's already here mentioned. Like, here it mentioned, Aleksi Munter and Mikko Kotaminki left the band in 2004. And what are you thinking about now is, so what happened? Suddenly you see bass, Swallow the Sun. You see these other guys going various bands, like there was this band Atacama. But what is more important is, what do we see the vocalist, Mikko Kotamäki, Swallow the Sun. And now My Dying Bride live. You would also see the keyboard player, Aleksi, going for Swallow the Sun. Once again, keyboards. So you had these couple of Algazant guys in the band, but they were not that important. What was important is that when you had like 3 different guys going for Swallow the Sun, it was like a new chapter, and this is a very good excuse to see what happens. See, Swallow the Sun founded in 2000, whereas, this ended in 2004. But if you really look at it, 2002 was the last Funeris Nocturnum album, whereas 2003 was the first Swallow the Sun album. So you kind of see the pattern. Maybe the guys were fed up with one thing, they wanted to create something different, and man, they went for totally something different. Like I mentioned, Funeris Nocturnum was always very fast tempo, and it was melodic black metal in the 1990s kind of a style. Well, early 2000s too, but still. Fast, aggressive, and all that stuff. Swallow the Sun went totally different direction with their melodic doom death. So, fast tempo ended, slow tempo came into be. What was really aggressive and blasphemous and all that stuff with Funeris Nocturnum, Swallow the Sun was suddenly like, let's go gothic, let's talk about death, let's go full funeral. Now it's not funeral doom, but still. So it was a curious story, but kind of also showcases how sometimes one career ends and it's a birth of another. It was, in a way, I guess, the same thing for Urn, and with Arthemesia's guy, in case the guys just went into different directions. So as you can see, all of these bands were quite different, but they were the products of their time nonetheless, in each respective corner with what they represented. And it's curious to think that how different things could have been if bands like Arthemesia and Funeris Nocturnum kept going on and, did build something bigger. I think Funeris Nocturnum, with the quality of their 3 albums, could have, become one of those cornerstone names among Finnish black metal scene, because they were so active and they were growing, they were evolving and all that stuff, but maybe they in a way also burned out. Arthemesia for sure didn't have that problem with 2 albums in 8 years, but probably had the lineup problem like so many bands did. I mean, being there, done that. Now, since they are all very different bands, it's hard to compare them to one another, and I don't even want to do this. Go Urn if you want to hear some black thrash or later black heavy metal. Go for Arthemesia if you want to hear some classic 1990s melodic synthrail black metal first and kind of a atmospheric post black metal later on. Or if you want to go most traditional of them all, go Funeris Nocturnum with their fast aggressive black metal. Mind you, full Urn discography is, at least for the time being, on Spotify, so it's pretty easy to listen to it, from the streaming services. In Arthemesia's case, only the latter album is out there. The first one you probably have to go for YouTube. And Funeris Nocturnum, because the band hasn't been active more than 20 years now, I had to actually at least to listen to it on YouTube, so you might not find it on your favorite streaming services. But do what you must. Links are included in the description box. Now, I hope you enjoyed this brief history lesson about these 3 bands. If you didn't, hey, it's fine too. Now, go fetch a drink, start listening, and stay metal.